Hello and welcome to the Bearded Math Man's YouTube channel. In this episode, we're going to be talking about our compound inequalities, how to solve them, how to graph them. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? In the previous video, you saw this same exact thing, but you didn't learn how to handle them. But I have a question for you. What are the values on this graph? Do you see that there is, well, anything less than -1, but also including -1? And what about over here? Do you remember what the open circle is talking about? That's right, it's talking about anything more than 2, but 2 is not included, yeah? So no number in between is included either. So what we really have is we have anything that's less than or equal to -1 and anything that's greater than 2. So we can actually put those together in a statement that's called an OR statement. We're going to learn about those today. There's one other kind we're going to learn about. They're called an AND statement. It looks like this. So if I were to ask you the same questions, you would say, well, there's nothing that's more than 2. And you would also say, well, there's nothing that's smaller than -1. But everything in the middle works, including the -1. So here, any number that is both greater than or equal to -1, but is also less than 2 works. So everything in between works. And so anything greater than -1, anything less than 2 works. And that's called an AND. And so we are going to talk about, in this episode, compound inequalities. Those are AND inequalities. They're also called OR inequalities. They're different. And people sometimes mix them up. So here's a way you can maybe keep it straight. Let's say you wanted to go out for dinner or go out to the movies with your friends, right? And your mom could say one of two things. She could say, hey, you have to clean your room and have to do the dishes. She could say, you have to clean your room or do the dishes. Which would you prefer? Well, probably or, because then you only have to do one or the other. You do not have to do both. And means both. So for example, this is an AND because all of these numbers are greater than or equal to -1 and are also smaller than 2. Whereas this is an OR because the numbers on this graph are either less than or equal to -2 or they are greater than 1. Do you see? So this is a AND statement because both conditions are met, and this is an OR statement because either condition is met, but not both, right? So these compound inequalities like this right here, sometimes we can join them together. ANDs look like this because x is greater than or equal to -1 is the same as saying -1 is less than x. Whereas when we have ORs, we use the word OR, right? So when you see a compound inequality like this, your graph's going to look like this. So these are the ANDs, it's in the middle. And the ORs, well, they stick out the side, kind of like an OR. Do you see? ORs stick out of the side. They go to the right. ANDs are stuck in the middle. So let's go ahead and take a look at how you would solve and graph an OR inequality. So what you're going to do is you're really going to treat it like it's two separate problems. So we're going to solve this one over here, and then we're going to solve this one over here. We're going to use inverse operations to do so, right? At this point, you should be pretty quick at the inverse operations. We're going to add 2 to both sides. We're going to divide by 3. X is equal to 10/3 on the other one. We're going to subtract 9. Then we're going to multiply by -1, because really, you need this to be a positive number. You could divide by -1. You could multiply by -1. Either way, when you're using inverse operations, if you remember, and if you don't, I'll put a link in the description below so you can learn about inverse operations. But when you're trying to get rid of multiplication or division, you want a product of 1 times your variable. Now, don't forget that when you multiply or divide inequalities by a negative, you have to change the direction of the inequality. So here's what we got. For this inequality right here, what we have is we have that x is less than 10 or it's greater than or equal to 5. So the graph, you start with your number line, you put 2 lines on your numbers, you got 10/3, you got 5. So 10/3 is going to be an open circle, and it's to the left because x is smaller. All the smaller numbers are to the left. Larger numbers are to the right. We have a solid dot for 5, right? Because it's greater than or equal to, and then it's off to the right. Boom, you're done. So let's go ahead and talk about an AND inequality. AND inequalities look like this, and this is a little weird because you know the old saying, what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Well, here, it's others. There are actually 3 parts. We have the left, the middle, and the right. What we do to one area, we need to do the others. And the idea is we want to keep x in the middle. We're still going to use inverse operations. We're going to do them in the order of inverse operations. And we're going to solve. What we do to one side, we're going to do all 3. So we're going to start off by adding 2 to all 3 sides. You just have to be careful with your arithmetic. You got a lot of it because you have 3 things to do. So you have -3, you have 3x plus 0. You don't have to write plus 0, of course. 13 plus 2 is 15. Now, we're going to get x by itself, so we're going to divide all sides by 3. Now, we want the x in the middle, so we're right on track right here, right? Dividing all sides by 3, and that's what we get. Now, to graph it, you're just going to apply what you already know, right? You're going to put a number line, you're going to put a circle on the 5, you're going to put a solid dot on the 1, and this is saying x is more than -1, and then so more is to the right, but at the same time, x is less than 5, so it's to the left of the 5, so it's going to be right there in the middle, right? So just to make sure we're on the same page right here, if you have an and inequality, what you're going to do is you're going to solve it, and you're going to get x in the middle. You're going to use inverse operations, and your graph's going to look like this. Your job is really to find what number is this and what number goes here. X is in the middle, inverse operations. But if you have an or inequality, what you're really doing, you're solving it as though you have 2 equations. Now, don't get all messed up by the A and the B, the C and the D. Those are just random numbers. These are what the equations are going to look like. You're going to get x in the middle for an and. You have 2 equations or 2 inequalities for an or. You solve them both, you graph them, you're done. Hey, if you found this video to be helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you want to get more notifications or notifications when more videos are put out, you can go ahead and subscribe. What's to lose? It's free, right? If you have questions about this, hey, leave them in the comments. I'd be happy to hear from you. Be happy to help you out. Now, here are some practice problems because without practice, you're probably going to forget. So go ahead and take a look at these. I will put a link in the description below where you can download these. Visit my website, beardedmathman.com. There's all kinds of help for you, high school math students there, all for free. Give it a shot.